If you've been following along, you've seen a lot of work happen to this old 69 Chevelle. Really like these cars, and I like the mods that we're doing because we are able to keep the factory original wheels on it. So when this thing cruises by you, it's gonna sound old school, but it is not gonna act old school. We've taken care of the front brakes, the back brakes, front suspension, part of the back suspension. And all of that stuff has been pretty budget minded. What we're doing now is not really a budget mod, but it is something that's very important because this car, if we leave it the way it is, it has a potential of wheel hop, sagging in the back, and being just a tire burner, but not actually hook. So the upgrade that we're gonna do, we are gonna take care of that. In this mod, what we're gonna be doing is we are gonna be taking the original shocks out and the original springs out, and we're gonna be throwing these away. And I'm gonna show you this really cool kit that we got. It's over here on this table. This is a Global West rear suspension kit. Now, this kit comes with a Crossmember to be able to mount these shocks in. It comes with some brackets to be able to strengthen the back end where the back of this goes, because we're changing where the load of the actual springs are. And we'll get into that as we go. But the cool thing about this is we have a set of shocks that we can adjust the compression and the rebound settings in. And why do we care about that? Well, I don't want to get too deep into it, but if he was to go and do a no prep race where he had some sort of a we'll say a bias ply or wrinkle wall tire, something like that, or even if you used radials, you could make this so that when the car weight transfers, this compresses all the way. Or if you go to the racetrack that's prepped, we put radials on, we can use these so that the car works differently and it extends. But that's all for another conversation, more of a racing style thing. With this kit, what we're doing is we are getting the basics in so that we can work on those things. As well, we can adjust the rear height of the car by turning these nuts and loading these springs more. So instead of this car looking sagged out, it's gonna hook up and it's gonna sit at whatever height you choose to put it at. All right, first of all, you got to get this old junk out. So what I did is I have the vehicle supported on jack stands on the chassis. I jacked up the rear differential just to get these shocks out. If you try taking it out without it jacked up, you're gonna have a lot of fight. So jack the diff up, get the shocks out, then let the suspension hang. Your control arms aren't going to allow it to drop right down. If you were doing more things with this where the control arms were out, these springs basically would be loose in here. So what I've done over here is took a spring compressor, compressed the spring, pulled it out. I'm going to do the other side. We'll pull the top of the shocks off, and then we'll start on installing the kit. First of all, get this old junk out. Now that the shocks and the springs are out of here, there is a really nice drill template, and I have just attached it with the factory shock hardware. Now the shocks originally bolted on right here, but their new shock mount has an extra hole that needs to be drilled here, and it is a 5/16 drill bit, and we just need to drill that hole out. This template is now done. This is the nuts that go up on top of these, and as you can see, it's got a kind of a taper in one side, flat on the other, and that taper is meant to hold it in here nicely. So all we want to do is slip that up top. These brackets are right and left, so you want to make sure you get the right bracket to go onto this side. Before I mess with this anymore, I'm going to get the hardware for the other side to hold it in place better. That'll make it a little easier to line up. Okay, this hardware we want to leave loose, and I'm going to have to move part of this fuel system here so that we can get ready to put the cross member across the back of the frame. Now this kit comes with a bunch of hardware. So this is a well, they call it 3 1/4, but it's closer to 3 1/2 inch bolt. What you're going to want to do is take these spacers off. You're going to need the spacer, the bolt, and the nut. And I actually am not using the Stover nuts. I actually have some fine thread nuts. We'll put these on at the end because I don't want to mess up the threads before we put this together permanently. Next thing we want to do is we're going to get this spacer started in there, and then, which is a little bit of a wiggle fest, I'm going to do it this way. Get the spacer in here and bring this up. Stick it in, and then we'll tighten these up, and we'll space this cross member, get these all centered as good as we can, and tighten up all of the brackets before we start drilling holes. Everything is snugged up. Now it's not tight. It's snugged up on both sides. We don't want to tighten anything until the very end, but everything is ready to be drilled. Then I'm just gonna take and drill one of these holes. Now this is 3/8. I'll drill this one here. This is a 3/8 hole, and the hardware is supplied. So because the drill is in the way of the camera, I'll just shut that off so it's not so annoying. Got one hole drilled, and you can take the hardware they sent with, and we're going to get one bolt in here, and I want to snug this up as well. And then the next steps, I'm going to drill one hole on the other side, snug it up like that. After these holes are drilled, snugged up on both sides, you take, and you're going to want to tighten everything except for this bolt. It's good snugged. So tighten everything else, and then drill the other holes here and here and on the other side, and tighten that up as well. Oh, and by the way, tightening these bolts, they need to be torqued to 45 foot-pounds. Now that I got all the bolts tightened, I'm going to take these bolts and spacers out of here. That upper cross member in there looks really nice. And the nice thing about it is it's not just looking nice, that is going to add a lot of structure to the back of this frame. And just a note, these are a bearing, so they rotate, and that helps you get that spacer out. Even though when you take the spacer out of here, it does take a little bit of convincing, but I'm telling you, that is going to add a lot of stability to the back of the car, tying both sides of the frame together where the suspension is going to be handling all the weight. But it's time to move on. We'll get at the bottom mounts. These are the bottom mounts they supply. They're really nice pieces. And what's going to happen is we are going to mount these directly to where the old shock used to mount on the back. But if we were to just mount the new ones to this, we'd probably end up with clearance issues because there is differences on this for clearance. But as well, this would not be weak enough to, or would not be strong enough, sorry, to support the weight of the car. So what has to happen is this is going to get bolted on in this spot. And there's only one hole you have to drill. And they give new hardware for the bottom here. So this bolt gets replaced. Now, like I said before, in this car, I am going to be taking this differential out to do some paint work and other stuff to the car. And I had mentioned before about getting a lock nut or a non-lock nut to put these together. If you have to take this apart, put it together a few times, you're going to want to get rid of these until final assembly. This is a Stover lock nut, and what it does is when you go through here, the threads on this end of this nut are squished. So when they tighten up, they really lock into these threads. And the torque spec that they have in the instructions are, I believe, 70 foot-pounds. And so when this all goes together, you're going to be putting good torque on them, and you want these Stovers to be biting the first time and not have threads that you're going over multiple times, and which will loosen all of this stuff up. Now, this all has to go in, and on this side here is what it is going to look like. So originally this bolts in, you tighten it up, and then you get these two bolts actually in, and then you drill this hole. And I've actually loosened all of this off. And the reason why is if I look in there, there's a bit of gap. And if you look in there, the filings that have piled up in there. So I would recommend getting a few 1/2-inch non-lock nuts before you start this job, because it's going to be nice to put it together, do your work, pull it apart, and then final assemble it. So I have this side set up. I'm going to be pulling this off to clean it out. We'll torque it up, and all I have to do is get this side set up where I can drill this hole. Now I cleaned that off, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to buff this area because of all the undercoating on here. I want this to sit flat. So we'll buff that up, get it bolted back together. Okay, this is something very common that you run into in the hot rod world. First of all, these brackets are absolutely beautiful, but guess what? This bracket did not fit. So I'm going to explain to you what I had to do. And this is so common in the hot rod world. And I bet you that there are a lot of viewers that can back me up on this. But yeah, actually, I'd love to hear your comments on how bad some stuff has been. And people, I'm going to blab, people a little bit, you know, too quickly blame the aftermarket industry for building bad parts. And yes, sometimes some of the stuff is really garbage. This kit is a really nice kit, as well as everything else that we've used on the car, but it's very common that it doesn't fit. And it's not necessarily the aftermarket part, because if you've hot rodded for any amount of time, you're going to find that this side is different than that side of the car, especially in these old muscle cars and anything older. These cars did not match side to side, and you see that even in new stuff. So what they probably did is build a jig off of one car and it worked out perfectly. But in this one here, I chose to pick where it fit the best. And the contour on this one right here, this is bent because this is on an angle. This fits absolutely perfect. Well, if I line it up absolutely perfect on here, it does not fit over here. So what I did is I took a die grinder, and this is pretty thick material, so you want to make sure you have a pretty good carbide tip, but I slotted this hole to make it line up. So really common in the hot rod industry. And what I did as well, because I didn't want to fight with this with a pry bar, trying to figure this all out, I took a ratchet strap, pulled the diff back, and rammed in this jack stand just to hold everything in line for me. And now, because I did that, and you don't want to die grind too much, do it as close as you can. But now this bracket really does fit nicely. So I'm going to carry on with this. And you know, I'd love to hear if anyone else has had some kits that literally you don't have to do anything to. Because I'm telling you, on the other side, this kit completely bolted on. Nothing needed to be done to it. It bolted on like it was meant to be there. So anyway, we'll carry on with this and get it all snugged up, really nice and snug with these. And I just want to say, the nuts that I'm using in the back, I didn't actually have enough fine thread nuts that weren't lock nuts. So what I have here is a lug nut. So they're a fine thread 1/2 inch lug nut. And that's what I'm choosing to use on this side as my non-lock nut nuts so that I can put this together without wrecking the threads on these. So we'll snug this up nice. And this side here has a little bit less gap. It still has gap in here, but it has less than the other side. I'm ready to drill that hole. Need a new battery. All right, I'm going to disassemble this, clean it all up, put it back together, and we'll carry on with the next step. Before you do this job, you're going to want to make sure that you go to the parts store and get yourself anti-seized. So you can see that I have taken, and on both sides, I have anti-seized the threads. You're going to want to make sure you look after these things. They're a beautiful piece, these coilovers. And that is something that is a must, is that you get those anti-seized up before you start to adjust anything. Now, up in the top here, I will undo this. I have the first spacer. So you're going to end up with 3 of these spacers and on each side. And how I get the spacers in is I take this little magnet, and it's going to be hard to do on camera holding one hand and my tongue just right, but we're going to go for it. I want to feed the magnet in to the back side and let it sit in that bearing. And then if I take this little spacer, I can just stick it to that magnet now. And then I'm going to take and feed this up here. I'll set up the camera so you can see what I'm doing. Now that I have that one spacer set up on the magnet, I'm going to take this other spacer and I'm going to put it on the bolt. That'll actually hold the bolt in nicely, kind of straight for you. And then I'm going to put the shock in. And when I put this coilover in here, I want to make sure that the valves on the bottom of it are facing, oh, that moved. I want to make sure that they're facing the middle of the car. And it doesn't matter the angle that I get this in, I just got to get it through that back spacer. Now, it's in all cockeyed and everything, but I can pull this magnet out because my bolt's through the spacer. Now, I'm going to be able to fight that straight and get it through. Now, you're going to want to actually take and pull the bolt back through again. And I'm a fat-fingered fella. I am going to take and use this magnet to get this spacer up there. And I'm just going to push it onto the bolt. Now, the bolt is just sticking through. I'm going to do the same thing with this nut. Get it up in there, push it in. and just push it through. Now, all I want to do on this until I get my ride height set is get that bolt started through. I'm not tightening this anyway. In the end, you're going to be tightening these bolts to 70 pounds as well as the bottom ones. Now, because these shocks are actually longer than the stock ones, you can almost get them in there, but what I like to do is just loosen this off and make sure that when you're done doing this, you reseat these again because they'll fall out of the top. But you can loosen that off so you can push the shock up into there. Have to do more. And this anti-seize is terrible, so be careful if you touch it like I just did, that you don't end up mucking it all over the place. So before I carry on with much more, I'm going to go and clean myself up here. This one's a little tight on this side to fit into this receiver here. So there's a little burr in here. I'm just going to take a file and knock that off. On both sides, actually. So on this side here, the weld is a little higher too, so I'm gonna have to go up higher and drop down into this to get past this little bit of excess weld here, because I don't want to file the paint off of that at all. So I'll just spin these nuts down so that I can get above it. We'll push this shock up. And you got to get that lined up really nice to get it in, but it probably would have went in without taking the burrs off. And then the next step I'm going to do, get the other side done. I already got it started over there. I'm going to get this reseated again, make sure it's in the top properly. Reseat all this. And then I'm going to put it up in the midway of travel and not lock anything up and get the wheels on. And then we'll take a look at what this car is sitting like, and we'll have to jack it up again to change the height. But we are well underway. And like I said, put these knobs towards the inside of the car. That way, well, that's what the instructions say. But if you try to put it in the other way, they're going to be hitting on this bracket. And if you're going underneath, if you're racing, doing stuff like that, you're going to want these easily accessible. Okay, the coilovers are in, and I started at about the halfway point, which I think is probably going to be fairly close to stock ride height. He wanted to be a bit jacked up in the back. I'm going to let him set that ride height, and the front suspension isn't settled up yet. So this car actually looks pretty 4x4 the way it is. And that is actually one thing. If you do go to use this suspension in the back, it's probably worth the phone call to talk to the guys, the tech guys at Global West, because these springs you can buy in different weights. So you're going to need to know some details about the car, like factory weight, stuff like that, and what mods you've done, so that they can actually get you set up with the right spring to put on these coilovers. Because if we need to lift this car because it has too light a spring in it, we can just pop the coilover out of the car and put a heavier spring on, pop it back in, and we're going to be able to adjust this down, and the height of the car will be higher. We'll be putting a heavier weight spring in. So it's worth it to call Global West if you're dealing with that. Now, if you take a look up in here, this is a really nice setup, a nice package. It goes together really well with the suspension and everything, or with, yeah, the other suspension mods we've done, as well as the brakes. This is going to be a really nice car to drive. And I would just want to set it down and we can take a look at the stance on this car. It's pretty high. This thing is pretty tall. It's 27 inches to the bottom of the chrome. These are some smaller. They're 235 60-15s on, so you could put a pretty big tire on with the amount of clearance that we have now. And if we were looking at this car with it all settled, I'm sure the front end will settle more. The back end probably won't. Everything is loose in it. This is the point that I will actually tighten the suspension so that it is gonna stay in this spot. It won't have to settle in. And if we look at the front of the car, I mean, this thing is pretty 4x. It's pretty tall. We'll just take a look. Right now, as it sits, the front is 27 as well. So it's level. When that suspension settles, I'm sure this car in the front's gonna go down. We'll probably end up having to lower the back. Now, if this was my car, there's only one thing different. If you've been following this video along, I love everything that we've did. It's been all budget minded, except for this edition. And I would have went one step further with the rear suspension and put some stuff in that's a little bit more adjustable, just because I like goofing around with the track, and I would like to be able to take the power we're going to put into this and really plant it to the ground. So I would probably be doing a little bit different with the upper control arms in the car. If you want to know what I'm talking about with that, you'll have to look back at the control arm videos if you haven't seen it so far. But other than that, I mean, this car is super cool. I'm excited to see it when it's running. We have a whole bunch more work to do to it. Yeah, if you have any questions about any of the work that we've done on this car, leave that in the comments. But as well, I'm very interested to see your comments on the aftermarket fitment of parts and what you've ran into, or the kits that you find that are better than the average ones. But usually when you get aftermarket parts, you're going to have to do some bit of adjusting because these cars were not built the same side to side. Other than that, I mean, keep watching, watch those old videos. And if you don't mind, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm really glad that you're spending the time with us, and have a great day.